There's some things that are so fundamentally evil that they have to be protected against. Now, I think, and your answer below, I'm going to give you a chance to say if you stay by it. If the president decides that his rival is a corrupt person and he orders the military or orders someone to assassinate him, is that within his official acts that for which he can get immunity?
It would depend on the hypothetical, but we can see that could well be an official act.
It could, and why? Because he's doing it for personal reasons. He's not doing it like President Obama is alleged to have done it, to protect the country from a terrorist. He's doing it for personal gain. And isn't that the nature of the allegations here? That he's not doing these acts in furtherance of an official responsibility. He's doing it for personal gain.
I agree with that characterization of the indictment, and that confirms immunity, because the characterization is that there's a series of official acts that were done for an unlawful.
No, because immunity says even if you did it for personal gain, we won't hold you responsible. How could that be?
It's Ken Harbaugh with Against All Enemies on the MeidasTouch network. What you just heard was Donald Trump's lawyer, John Sauer, arguing that a president could claim immunity for ordering a political assassination. This legal theory first appeared in a lower court hearing in which one of the judges raised the specter of a sitting president ordering SEAL Team 6 to kill a political rival. Trump's legal team argued then that presidential immunity would cover such an act, and accountability could only follow a successful impeachment by Congress. The danger of accepting this legal theory to democracy, to the very concept of equality under the law, should be obvious. Apparently, it is not obvious to Trump's legal team, which has now reiterated this argument before the Supreme Court. The pushback from those who care about where this might lead has been fierce. Here's Nicole Wallace.
We are drinking from the news fire hoses today. We turn to this story. In all of modern American history, there have been few days, if any, where the United States Supreme Court has heard arguments more radical, more extreme than it did today. The only question now is who that says more about. Trump, the team making the arguments, or the judicial body that heard them. This morning and stretching into early this afternoon, the highest court in the land considered the scope of presidential immunity, how far it goes, and what constitutes an official act. You already heard what Trump's team contended in front of a lower court, that now infamous idea that the use of SEAL Team 6 to hypothetically, at least for now, assassinate a political opponent would be within the realm of immunity in Trump's legal team's view.
The argument presented by Trump's legal team is not complicated. In a perverse way, it's elegant in its simplicity. A president is immune from prosecution for any so-called official act unless they are first impeached. Which of course begs the question, what if a sitting president orders the assassination of anyone in Congress who would dare vote to impeach? The argument breaks down entirely when drawn to its logical conclusion. Thank goodness we still have a few justices on the Supreme Court willing to consider the extreme endpoint of such arguments, like Justices Sonia Sotomayor and Elena Kagan.
So in front of the Supreme Court today, Supreme Court Justice Elena Kagan took that example further.
Well, he's gone. Let's say this president who ordered the military to stage a coup. He's no longer president. He wasn't impeached. He couldn't be impeached. But he ordered the military to stage a coup, and you're saying that's an official act.
I think it would depend.
That's immune.
I think it would depend on the circumstances whether it was an official act. If it were an official act, again, he would have to be impeached.
Well, what does that mean, depend on the circumstances? He was the president. He is the commander-in-chief. He talks to his generals all the time, and he told the generals, I don't feel like leaving office. I want to stage a coup. Is that immune?
If it's an official act, there needs to be impeachment and conviction beforehand, because the framers viewed that kind of
if
very
it's an
low
official
risk.
act, is it an official act?
if it's an official act, it's
Is
impeachment.
it an official act?
On the way you've described that hypothetical, it could well be. I just don't know. You'd have to, again, it's a fact-specific, context-specific determination.
That answer sounds to me as though it's like, yeah, under my test, it's an official act, but that sure sounds bad, doesn't it?
Well, it certainly sounds very bad.
We have the ingredients here for a legal coup. Lawyers conspiring to invent a rationale for the most extreme executive actions imaginable. If on January 6th, Donald Trump had been confident that he would have been immune from prosecution no matter what he did, I think we can assume that he would have ordered his followers or the military to prevent the transfer of power. I talked to Stuart Stevens some time ago about the legal machinations that precede an autocratic takeover. He lays it all out in his excellent book, The Conspiracy to End America. But it's worth revisiting the 5 ingredients for autocracy and the importance of a supporting legal rationale.
When you read a lot about how democracies fall into autocracy, and, it's not an obscure subject. People have written brilliant books on. And there seem to be 5 elements that always were present. And we talk about and write about and discuss, cover, report these 5 elements, but I don't think we do enough of their collective impact, both directly how they're connected and synergistically how they're connected. And just to go through it, the 5, in no particular order of importance, were support of a major party, which certainly, Republican Party is a autocratic movement now, what it is. You need financiers, and God knows they have that out the wazoo, the Peter Thiels of the world and everybody else. You need propagandists, which, you look at Fox News, and Fox News has sort of become the New York Times of the far right. There's like, they're like the establishment. You need shock troops, which we saw on January 6th. And you need, and I think this is probably the most important, actually, a legal system to justify it. So if Georgia passes a law saying they can overturn the presidential election popular vote, when they do it, you can't say it's illegal. It's like perfectly legal. And that is where I think the most underreported and potentially impactful efforts are being made.
It's Ken Harbaugh with the MeidasTouch Network. The film Against All Enemies, which I co-produced with Ben Meiselas and this network, has won awards around the world for its up-close portrayal of America's insurrectionist movement. It premieres in the U.S. on March 29th on Amazon and Apple TV. Go to againstallenemiesfilm.com or click the link below. But don't just watch Against All Enemies. Tell your friends about it. It's one more way to hold accountable those who threaten our democracy. Thanks, Midas Mighty. Let's use our power well. I just reread for this interview that chapter about the legal underpinnings for any autocratic movement to succeed, and you open it with that quote.
No, it's incredible. Huh?
It's unbelievable. And I reread that chapter in particular because I agree with you. That is probably the scariest of the 5. Yeah. I mean, that's saying something because shock troops are pretty scary as well. But when you have a legal architecture that is propelling you in this direction, I mean, it's evocative of the legal justification for, I'm gonna break Godwin's law here, but the Holocaust itself had a legal architecture. That's the first thing they did. They made sure they could justify it legally. And by the way, Mike Godwin said when it comes to autocracy in America today, his law no longer applies. So I think we're okay.
Yeah, you get a pass.
We get.
I actually think it's really important to talk about the 1930s. And when I wrote "It Was All a Lie," I originally started writing that book because there are a lot of people wrong about 2016, but it's really, really, really hard to find anybody more wrong than me. I didn't think that Trump would win the primary. I didn't think he'd win the general. And when he did, I had a lot of these Republican friends said, man, like Trump hijacked the party. And I'm like, guys, I don't know. I'd like to think that. But, when the hijacker's on the plane, he's not popular with the passengers. People aren't saying, well, I'm glad we're not going to grandma's house. We're going to go to Cuba. And Trump's really popular on the plane.
I fully expect that Fox News and the Trump sycophants on the far right are going to invent whatever legal rationales they need in order to defend the former president. His legal team has doubled down on the presidential immunity argument since they were humiliated by that lower court. But it all leaves me wondering, as someone with a law degree, someone who has spent lots of time around people who have dedicated their lives to the practice of law, do these lawyers really believe in what they are saying? Of course, they don't have to believe in the arguments they're presenting on behalf of their client, former President Trump. One of the core values of our legal system is that everyone deserves representation. Even the guilty have a right to counsel, and that counsel doesn't have to believe they're innocent. Maybe that's what's happening here. Maybe these attorneys know their arguments are specious, but are presenting them out of a sense of lawyerly duty. It's even possible that these lawyers know how damaging to democracy their legal theories would be if upheld, and are secretly praying that the court strikes it all down. But I doubt it, because I have seen what happens to people in Trump's orbit, and I actually once knew the lawyer now presenting Trump's immunity argument before the court. John Sauer and I went to college together. We were part of a small, tight-knit group of scholarship kids. I haven't talked to John since graduation, but I remember him well as a kind and thoughtful person. John was deeply committed to his faith, and he wanted to pursue a career that would help people. But I have seen what happens to those who try to orbit from a safe distance the black hole that is Donald Trump. Almost every time, they are sucked in, never to reemerge. When that happens to people I once knew, people I cared about, it's tragic on a personal level. But when those people apply their enormous talents to the project of destroying our democratic safeguards, that's a level of cynicism I can barely comprehend. And it's yet one more example of the inescapable reality that Donald Trump corrupts everything he touches.
Love this video? Make sure you stay up to date on the latest breaking news and all things Midas by signing up to the MeidasTouch newsletter at MeidasTouch.com/newsletter.